All right, everybody. Hope you had a good meal and somebody nice to eat with. And if you didn't, then I hope that you survived it anyway. You're here, so we had both. We had both. Let's sing 525. 525. A lot of folks needing our prayers, our thoughts today, this afternoon. We talked about folks this morning, still continuing to pray for them and those who've lost loved ones, a lot going on with them as well. And I love this song because Jesus does know what we need. And he doesn't always give us everything that we want. But as the song says, he gives us everything that we need, and he knows what we need. So we're thankful for the blessings that come as a result of that. Glad Brother Selton is up and running too. I meant to say something about that this morning, but I imagine you were here Wednesday, weren't you? Or were you? Okay, good. We're on your side. We're on your side. All right, Philip, back to this song. Will you say us a prayer, please, sir? Okay. My Jesus knows when I am lonely. He knows each pain. He sees each tear. He understands each lonely heartache. He understands because he cares. My Jesus knows just what I need. Oh, yes, he knows just what I need. He satisfies and every need supplies. Yes, he knows just what I need. My Jesus knows when I am burdened. He knows how much my heart can bear. He lifts me up when I am sinking and brings me joy beyond compare. My Jesus knows just what I need. Oh, yes, he knows just what I need. He satisfies and every need supplies. Yes, he knows just what I need. When other friends seem to forget me, when skies are dark, when hope is gone, by faith I feel his arms about me and hear him say, you're not alone. My Jesus knows just what I need. Oh, yes, he knows just what I need. He satisfies and every need supplies. Yes, he knows just what I need. Brother Philip. Amen. Yeah, that song we sang is a little bit low, but if it wasn't a little bit low to start with, it was going to get really high in the chorus, and I had to pick one side, and I picked the low side instead of the high side, and still my voice cracked a little bit, but I'm glad we sang that, and I appreciate your help. Thank you, Philip, for your prayer. We are still in the book of James. I want to say thank you to Elaine, who spoke last Sunday. He did a good job. I had heard that he had done a little speaking along the way and thought it might be encouraging to him. And so he came and shared a good lesson. I hope that you were able to be here to hear it. If not, then it is available on the Atlas Church page, and I encourage you to go back and watch it. Appreciate John filling in on Wednesday as well, and looking forward to getting back to our study of James. Week before last, I was kind of wrapping up chapter 1. I wrapped it up too fast. And as I was doing some thinking and studying about what I wanted to talk about as we got back into the book of James. Remember James, the brother of Jesus. He was what seems to be a very meek but powerful person. He was humble, but he was one that commanded a lot of attention because of his wisdom and because of his love of people and the things that he was trying to do to support the cause of right and to follow the precepts that Jesus has taught. You remember, James wasn't a believer himself, and there was a lot of things that had to happen before he came to a knowledge of a belief that required some action on his part. You can believe things and not do anything about it. But James exceeded that and was known as a leader in the church. And so as we're kind of thumbing through, and I'd say this kind of study is what I would term kind of a thumb through of the book, at least initially. Hope that we can look a little more in depth at maybe some other things as we go along. This is the last leaders study this year, James, 1st and 2nd Peter. And we're going to take our time a little bit to do so, but then maybe go back and get some of the things that maybe we missed along the way here. But as we do this thumb through, I'd call it, and just kind of looking at some of the things in each chapter and on the pages of the book here, I thought you can't stop chapter 1 without talking about the last verse. James was someone that I think you and I could see as not just someone who had reached a mental assent about things, but he had reached a point where he understood that he had a responsibility. And if there's a disconnect, and there may be more than one in the modern church today, there may be more than one disconnect. But if there's a disconnect in hearing and seeing maybe what people say and what they do, it's realizing that there's more to this than just having a common belief on things. There comes a point in recognition of what you're reading to realize that there is a responsibility that we all have. And our responsibilities may be different due to our talents and due to different things that we may be tasked with as far as things are concerned. I mean, elders and deacons, preachers, Bible class teachers, folks that cook good pecan pies and other things. Let's be sure we understand that we all have a place and all have things that we can do and talents that we've been given to accomplish great things to glorify God, and gets back to some of what we talked about a few weeks ago. But as we get to the last part of James chapter 1, and one of the richest chapters in Scripture, I'd say, in the book of James, is James chapter 1, kind of lays it all out there, helps everyone to understand and to know the process is not easy, but the payoff is unbelievable. And the recognition of that is so important. But now, it's more than just what God can give you and what God doles out to you and I as Christians. It's, what is our investment in it? What is our investment in it? And I'd suggest to you, and this is not new news, and this is not something you don't know, just a reminder as we launch our thoughts for today. As you have an investment in something, you tend to have more interest in it. As you have an investment in something, you tend to have more interest in it. Now, I know we're a little bit late for planting gardens right now, but I know that there are some families who involve their smaller children in garden planting. Any of y'all do that or have done that, you know what I'm talking about. If you have a child, young person that is a part of the process of planting the seed, then they're going to tend to want to see it grow. And as it grows, they're going to tend to want to see the fruit of the vegetables as they might be grown. And in some cases, they're even going to be apt to eat those things because they were there from the beginning when the soil was prepared to the seed being planted, fertilized, water if it needed it, and then watching the process as it would grow from that early stage then to full fruition in the fruit, and the fruit being taken or the vegetables being harvested. Well, James is talking about planting a garden in James chapter 1. And really, he's talking about, in these last verses, he's talking about an investment and really, I would say, more of a realization of and a reaction type thing to the blessings that God has given and the things that come as a result of that. As we closed a week before last in this study, some of the points that I'd made about the chapter so far was do what you've believed about God, realizing that belief will lead you in the right direction. That belief will also, if you come to a full realization of it, will change your attitude. It will change your feelings. It will change your thoughts. It will change the words that you say and the way that you say them. And not only that, it will prompt you to action. And seeing that, understanding that, and recognizing that, I think is where then we needed to add just one more verse before we stopped reading at verse 26 to be sure that we also added verse 27. Where there James writes these words and kind of trying to help the whole thing blossom by saying this: pure and genuine, or undefiled, pure and genuine religion in the sight of God the Father means caring, he specifically notes here, caring for orphans and widows in their distress and refusing to let the world corrupt you. Now here's a snippet of what we could say about James 1:27. James notes a specific responsibility toward two groups that could be lumped into one because of their plight during the time which this was being written. We'll talk some more about that. Not to the exclusion of other needs or other people who need to be helped, but this would be something that would be right in their face and right in their minds on a regular and a continual basis, wherever they were and wherever they lived, particularly, especially around Jerusalem. When he talks about widows and orphans, but he precedes that by saying, okay, now what we're talking about here is a reaction to this message of the gospel, the salvation of your soul. Our reaction to that is going to be how we show what we've realized or understanding who has loved us enough to care for us. And that would be our reaction in this whole situation. So he says, pure and genuine, or pure and undefiled religion. And let's be sure we define what the word religion means. Pure religion and undefiled before God and the Father is this. What does it mean? What does it mean to be religious? Some years ago, and I could tell you more about it, probably could sing the song to you. I heard it enough times in years gone by, but there was a little singing group that sang on the radio that their message, one of the songs that they sang is, I want a religion I can feel deep down in my soul, or down deep in my soul. You may have heard that. I want a religion I can feel. And you know, my first thought in recalling that in connection with this study today was I wanted to push back on that, because you know it's not just something that we feel, but I would say there might be a little wisdom in it, because if we don't feel it, we're never going to do it. And the words that are connected to this idea of being compassionate toward someone else. And that's the word visit, being compassionate toward someone else, particularly, especially something that's obviously known and obviously understood in widows and orphans, then maybe we should want a religion that we can feel, not just one where I heard somebody say this morning in Bible class, we're talking about, having the right focus, and that right focus takes them out of the box checking business. And, we could get in a situation where we just check the boxes and we've got all our boxes checked. And we look at heaven and we say, well, all right, God, here's my thing. It's all filled out and I've got every box checked. Now, I'm looking forward to my heavenly home. Well, it's more than that. It's more than just checking the boxes. And sometimes you hear somebody talk about religion and they ask the question, well, what religion are you? And in that situation, they're wanting to designate what building you go in or what name is over the door where you go in to do your worship. Well, what religion are you? I think that is a misuse of the term. I think that's a misuse of the term. I believe that defining words will help show that to be true. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. But what religion are you? And well, I go to this church or I go to that church. And I get the question and I get the answers, but I don't know that it's the right question. And just answering it doesn't mean that you have the right answer either. So here is where we need to land, at least where I've landed. You need to do your own thinking, but here's where I've landed, that religion is not just something. Religion is not just something that you feel. It's something that you do as a result of your relationship with God. I can do good things and never have a relationship with Christ. Did you know that? I can help people all day long and never have a relationship with Christ. Can't call that religion. I think you can call it philanthropy. I've spent $800 on my eyes and now my mouth won't work. Philanthropy. The idea of what you're capable or what you have a desire to do. And you could do good things, never representing Christ. And in doing good things, not representing Christ, you're going to get the credit. Well, in that situation, that negates what Jesus talked about in the Sermon on the Mount, where he said, let your light so shine before men that they may see what you're doing or your good works. And then as a result of that, what? Glorify your Father which is in heaven. So the idea of a religion, not just being something that you feel, but it's something that you do as a result of your relationship with Christ. It's not just something that you do that is disassociated with a feeling, though, either. So a little bit of a quirky answer there to try to figure out, well, all right, why is it that people help people? Or why is it that people give to someone who's needy? Or why is it that people prepare food for someone who is sick or someone who's recovering? Why is it that somebody, hands somebody $50 or $100 and says, here, if you can't use this, give it to somebody that can. Or maybe they know that you have connection with folks. And sometimes that happens to me. Somebody will walk up and say, hey, here, I know Brother Selton says it happens to him. Somebody comes through and says, hey, here, somebody may need this. And, you pass it along. And especially when we were all shut in. More than one time, I had a particular person, and she's probably watching today. And I've thanked her every time who sent me checks. In fact, I had two that sent checks and said, hey, help somebody with this if somebody needs help. And I was always able to share that money. And it was interesting that just about every time that happened, there was an immediate need that came to my sight, or an immediate need that came up. And there was times that I'd call Brother Selton. I'd say, hey, I've got this money that so-and-so has sent, and he'd say, well, we've got this need. And it would just make a good connection there. We connect the dots between a gift that was given to somebody that might know somebody, and they might have never made that connection. And so you see that opportunity that comes as a result of that. Religion, while spiritual in nature, is also something that you participate in because of your connection with Jesus Christ. And really there are two words that I want to be sure that get connected here with this idea of religion and this relationship and all of that. And one is the word compassion, and the other is the word mercy. Compassion and mercy. Compassion is having a heart or being able to feel for someone else. Philip prayed about it. We prayed about it this morning. It was on the announcement sheet. I'm having a hard time getting that group of little girls off my mind out there. I'm having a hard time with that. I mean, I'm having a hard time with that. And Ella has a lot more information about it than I do. Frankly, I have been on a tear for the last 72 hours, and I really hadn't had time to dig into it too much. But what I've heard about it is awful, and it breaks my heart. And, here's the man that was a director. I don't know a single thing about him. I'm not doing anything except giving credit in this moment for what was going on. He knew it was coming, and he was trying to save them and died trying. And for every one of those children who is missing, my hope is that somehow, some way, they're going to be found alive. I don't know, if any of them have been found deceased or not at this point. I do know that there's been a number that has been connected with that, but I'm not going to speculate, especially on this online situation. But, my heart can't help but hurt. And fair warning to you, if something like that doesn't touch you, then I'm going to encourage you to start praying more and asking God to soften your heart, because you can become so jaded to this world that nothing affects you. And if you get in that situation, you're going to lose a connection that should be an automatic response when it comes to a relationship with Jesus and the plight of other people. One is compassion. The other is mercy. You might say, well, what about grace? Well, you're welcome to your own feelings about all of that. Extending grace to somebody is something that we talk about and that we think about. And I don't know how qualified we are to go very far in that situation. We can give somebody something they don't deserve, but most of the time in the relationships that we have, we can justify what somebody needs. Odds are we're not going to run across a lot of people that don't deserve something. You say, well, now what about forgiveness? Well, Jesus talks about that. Forgive us our trespasses as what? We forgive others who trespass against us. So to me, that's a step back from what we're talking about in this matter. Because if I'm not willing to forgive somebody else, I shouldn't expect them to forgive me. And if I am willing to forgive somebody else, that's no guarantee that they're going to forgive me. So a little bit different in the idea of mercy. And mercy is the time where we are able to extend our hand more so and give somebody something in that situation that they, and you say, well, that sounds more like grace to me. Well, you understand the point I'm trying to make is our willingness to extend ourselves beyond just the things that we may think or the things that we may want. The idea of then caring for or visiting, that's a part of this verse. To care for or visit. Pure religion and undefiled before God and the Father is this: to visit the fatherless and the widows in their affliction and keep himself unspotted from the world, to show compassion, to care for orphans and widows in their distress, and refuse to let the world corrupt you, to go see, to inspect. To inspect, that's a word that's connected with this idea of visiting or caring for. Another way that you or I can define that word to care for or visit would be to review with the intent to relieve a burden. To review with the intent to relieve a burden. There are two words that are connected in the New Testament that I want to encourage you to do a little more study about it and see about and think about as you continue to grow. And those two words are do good. Do good. Do good. I noted at least 13 times that would relate to what we're talking about. The idea that you and I can do can do good, as you have opportunity, do good to all men, especially those of the household of faith. Well, you know, what's the reverb on all that? What comes back to us in that situation when we do good to somebody? Well, in the first place, especially someone who isn't a follower of Jesus Christ, who may not know much about somebody who is a follower of Jesus Christ, when we do good in our culture, they're going to wonder, why'd you do that? Why did you help me? Why did you, whatever? And you and I, as followers of Christ, can relate to what Jesus said in Matthew 25. You know, I was hungry, and I was thirsty, and I was a stranger, and I was sick, I was naked, I was in prison, and you did to me. Or I was all those things and you didn't. The prospects of sharing what God has given us with other people. And there's times that I've had people say, well, you know, I need what God has given me first. I understand that. But you know what I've seen through the years, and I really to this point haven't found an exception. And that doesn't mean that I'm all that traveled and have knowledge that maybe exceeds my experiences. But I would say this, I've never seen it. If God can give it to me one time, if I give it away, if he can give it to me once, he can give it to me again. And you know, sometimes the more we try to keep what God has given us, the harder it is for him to bless us. This watch that I have on right here, no way I would have ever purchased it if I'd ever been able to. The lady who gave it to me with anticipation. Sweetheart lady, I preached her funeral years and years later, had no idea it was going to happen. Well, it was such a gift. I was so nervous, I locked my keys in the car. And it was such a gift that, you know, when I got in there and she handed me the box that it was in, she said, do you know what that is? I said, I'm afraid of what it is. And I put it on there in her presence, and I thought, man, this is not something that I deserve. It's something I appreciate, not something I deserve. But I reminded her of her son, and she wanted me to have it. And she'd given others gifts of a similar nature, so I wasn't alone in that. Well, I carried it home and left it in the box and put it in the drawer. Next Sunday, I went to church, and here comes my sweet friend. She said, where's my watch? I said, it's at home in the drawer. She said, You know, you can cross a lot of people, but not a little old woman. And I knew what meant. I mean, I grew up knowing what meant. She said, I gave you that watch to wear. And if you ain't going to wear it, I knew what that meant too. If you ain't going to wear it, then bring it back. I wore it the next Sunday. How many times does God give us something that we just put in a drawer that we don't use? And if anybody sees, and I'm quick to say, I didn't purchase this, it was a gift. And most of the time I tell the whole story. This idea of being compassionate and merciful and doing good. And having the opportunity. And you know, one of the things that I suppose maybe I need to be praying more about is, Lord, help me to see the opportunities that you place before me as opportunities and not as obstacles. Help me to see the opportunities that you put before me as opportunities and not as obstacles. Because you could easily see some of the opportunities and think, well, that's an obstacle. And it might be that God put that person in your path knowing that you had a gift that he'd given you that he thought you could give them. Right here on my piece of paper. What are heavy burdens that need relief? What are heavy burdens that need relief? As you have opportunity to do good to all men, what are some heavy burdens that need relief? And I just thought to myself, what could they be? I thought about sickness. I thought about physical maladies. I did think about hunger. Think about grief. Grief is a pretty heavy burden. Loneliness is tough. Loneliness is tough. And somebody can be lonely and be surrounded by people. Think about injustice. Then on the other side of that, I think of justice. That's a pretty heavy burden. If you do something wrong and you're in trouble, somebody needs to help you. I guess ultimately on that list would be sin. Do the wrong thing. I guess if there's ever a time when you need help, it's when you've done the wrong thing, right? But what about these orphans and widows? And we'll wrap it up here. What about the orphans and widows? And what I wrote here was that orphans and widows were not all that were going to need help, but they were glaring examples of people who did. In that day, in that age, I don't have to explain to you the social structure of things in order for that to be understood and recognized. Today, if in many cases, not every time, but in many cases, if a spouse dies, often there's some kind of life insurance or some kind of fund that can be drawn from or something that's been put aside for that purpose. That really wasn't the way things were in that day. A widow and an orphan, they were vulnerability. That's the second big word today. They were vulnerability to the nth degree. Vulnerability at its worst. You say, well, why was it such a big thing in Jerusalem? Or why was it such a big thing in that day and that age? Well, some things that I discovered about that, and these may be things you already knew about, but I'm kind of, I guess, late to the game in learning them. But there was a short lifespan of men in that day. I don't know exactly the age, but many men died by the age of 40 in that day. And you think, wow, how many people who didn't have any kind of income or a way to gain any income in that day and age, if they're 40 years and under, many times the death of a husband making someone a widow also made somebody an orphan. And so you have a population of people who are growing up as orphans to widowed mothers who did not have the capacity to earn without being a slave or something unsavory. The short lifespan of men, the threat of war was constant. And often in revolts or rebellions, the younger, they'd rise up. Well, we're gonna take our country back. Well, no, you're just gonna get killed because you're not gonna beat the Romans. And so here James says to these people who would know all about this, as Christians, as followers of Jesus Christ, if you want to show your compassion and your mercy, if you want to show your relationship, if you want to show your religion, then go see about somebody that you know who is in the plights of this world and the plights of this life, and help them. One reason being, you may be the only one who will, or you may be the only one who can. Don't use the excuse, well, somebody else will do it. No, somebody else may not do it, or somebody else may be waiting on me or you. You know, an example of this, Mark chapter 12. Mark chapter 12, Jesus sat down near the collection box at the temple, and he watched the crowds as they dropped in their temple tax money and all that stuff. And you know, the text says many rich people put in large amounts, and there were percentages that were needed. And verse 42 says, then a poor widow came and dropped in 2 small coins. How much was that worth? Well, let me tell you. He says in verse 43, I tell you the truth, this poor widow has given more than all the others who are making contributions. For they gave a tiny part of their surplus, but she, poor as she is, has given everything she had to live on. You know, you say, well, how much is 2 mites or how much is 2 coins worth? It don't matter. It was all she had. I think that's the kind of heart that James is trying to mine out of the people that he's writing to in James chapter 1. David, in talking about all of this in regard especially to God's responsibility or God's reaction to this, in Psalm 68 said he was father to the fatherless, defender of widows. This is God, whose dwelling is holy. God places the lonely in families. He sets the prisoners free and gives them joy. And you just think how shackled somebody could be who's in one of these things we talked about earlier: sickness or hunger or grief or loneliness, injustice, justice, sin, and all the other things could be added there. And then we won't take time today to do so, but you could read Matthew 25 and hear what I mentioned to you a moment ago. But James, the book of James, was one of the first books written in what we now call the New Testament. And you think about how quick this information got out and how many people's lives were changed as a result of it. In Acts chapter 6, verse 1, the Bible says, but as the believers rapidly multiplied, there were rumblings of discontent. The Greek-speaking believers complained about the Hebrew-speaking believers, saying that their widows were being discriminated against in the daily distribution of food. Well, there may have been a reason why James said what he said. Next Sunday, we want to talk about the second part of verse 27. And the second part of verse 27 is refusing to let the world corrupt you. Now, there's some obviously quick thoughts that we could have in regard to that and thinking about how the world can corrupt us. But you know, just the way the world can corrupt our thought process, or how the world can corrupt the way we respond to someone. How the world, I mean, there's a lot that's going to be a part of that study, and I encourage you to read ahead and reach your own conclusions as you study and think about this. So that's why I'm telling you, I finished chapter 1 before I should have. And I wanted to go back and spend a little bit more time in verse 27. Thank you for spending it with me today. If there's an immediate need, a spiritual need, and if it's a spiritual need, it is an immediate need, please make that known. If it's a desire to be obedient to Christ or a desire to make things right as Christians, maybe things are out of sorts, maybe there's other things that you need help with, we'll help you and do everything we can possible to be of an encouragement to you. All right. Don't forget those that are sick. What my intentions are, as soon as we get finished over at Cedarview, I'm going to walk over to the nursing home and spend a little time with Jack and Jewel and Francis. I haven't heard anything since a little while after church, but some saw Francis leave and asked me about it, and she just wanted to go over there and spend time with them. And so I did talk to Vic after church. And don't know if anything's changed since then, but we continue to pray for Jack and Jewel and Francis and all of them as that's all going on. And if you want to walk over there after Cedarview, you're welcome to be there. I don't just have to see what's going on when we get there, but would like to go over and have a prayer and just make our presence known and let them know that we're all here. So if you go to Cedarview and don't mind coming over there, then please do. And let's spend a few minutes spend a few minutes with them in this process that Jack Peck is in today. Others that have lost loved ones, talk about that. If you hadn't had a chance to take the Lord's Supper, Keith's going to help you with that. If you'll make your way to the foyer, then he'll assist you taking of the Lord's Supper today. All right. Thank you for being here. Appreciate your time and your attention. And let's go out and do something good for the Lord today and encourage folks as we have an opportunity to do so. All right. Dwight, lead us in a prayer as we close, please, sir. Amen. I forgot to say about Thad Morgan's finger food thing tonight at 5. So please note that and come if you can and will. Okay. We love you. Thanks for being here today.